The massive conference hall of the Galactic Empire's military headquarters buzzed with laughter. Representatives from a dozen different species filled the amphitheater, their various forms of amusement creating a cacophony of sounds. At the center of their mockery stood Admiral Zarthak of the Krellian Empire, his four arms gesturing wildly as he recounted the latest intelligence report. "They call themselves hunters," Zarthak announced, his mandibles clicking with mirth. "These humans claim they can track and eliminate targets from distances our best soldiers cannot even see. They speak of something called snipers as if it were some mystical art form." The assembled military leaders erupted in fresh waves of laughter. General Thox of the Vorthan Collective slammed his tentacles against the table. "Primitive projectile weapons. While we wage war with plasma cannons and antimatter bombs, these hairless apes hide in vegetation and shoot metal pellets. Have you seen their military doctrine?" Commander Seraph of the Etherian fleet added, her crystalline form shimmering with amusement. "They actually train soldiers to lie still for days, covered in plant matter. They call it camouflage, as if becoming one with dirt and leaves could match our advanced cloaking technology." The holographic display showed images captured from human military training facilities. Soldiers crawled through mud, their faces painted in patterns of green and brown. Others lay motionless in tall grass, their weapons aimed at distant targets. The sight prompted another round of derisive laughter. "Look at them," Zarthak continued, pointing at the images. "They measure their skill by hitting targets at what they call long range, perhaps 1,000 of their meters. Our standard plasma rifles can vaporize targets at 10 times that distance. And their jungle warfare," added Lieutenant Krex of the Saurian Dominion, his scales rippling with disdain. "They actually believe that fighting in primitive forest environments gives them an advantage, as if our thermal sensors and motion detectors could be fooled by mere foliage." The Empire's military council had good reason for their confidence. For 3,000 years, the Galactic Empire had dominated known space through superior technology. Their warships could glass entire planets from orbit. Their ground forces wielded energy weapons that could punch through any armor. Their soldiers wore power suits that enhanced strength tenfold and provided complete environmental protection. In contrast, humanity had only achieved faster-than-light travel 50 years ago. Their first contact with the Empire had been peaceful enough, but tensions arose when humans refused to submit to imperial authority. Now, as border disputes escalated into open conflict, the Empire prepared to teach these newcomers a lesson in humility. "The humans have requested a military exchange," Admiral Zarthak announced, trying to suppress his amusement. "They wish to demonstrate their special forces capabilities on Verdant 7. Verdant 7 was a jungle world on the contested border, thick with vegetation and teeming with dangerous wildlife. The Empire maintained a military base there, more as a statement of ownership than strategic necessity. "Let them come," General Thox declared. "We'll show them what real warfare looks like. Our mechanized divisions will crush whatever primitive forces they send." "I volunteer my elite guard," Commander Seraph offered. "They've never lost a single engagement. It will be educational to see how quickly these snipers surrender when faced with real soldiers." The council approved the exchange unanimously. They would humor the humans, allow them to send their best warriors to Verdant 7. It would serve as a demonstration to all species considering resistance to imperial rule. The humans would learn their place in the galactic hierarchy. 3 weeks later, the human contingent arrived at Verdant 7. The Imperial forces watched with barely concealed amusement as a single transport ship descended to the planet's surface. No escort vessels, no heavy equipment carriers, just one modest craft. The ship's cargo ramp lowered, and 30 humans emerged. They wore simple fabric uniforms and patterns that matched the jungle environment, carrying what appeared to be primitive chemical propellant weapons. No power armor, no energy shields, no hover vehicles. Just soldiers with backpacks and rifles. Colonel Marcus Webb led the human detachment. A veteran of Earth's Special Operations Forces, He had spent 20 years perfecting the art of unconventional warfare. His team consisted of the best snipers, scouts, and jungle warfare specialists humanity had to offer. They had trained for months specifically for this environment, studying every piece of intelligence available about Verdant 7 and Imperial military doctrine. The Imperial base commander, General Korvax, greeted them with barely disguised contempt. His 3-meter-tall frame was encased in gleaming power armor, and his personal guards stood behind him like chrome-plated titans. "Welcome to Verdant 7, Korvax rumbled, his voice amplified by his suit speakers. "I trust your journey was comfortable. We've prepared training areas where you can demonstrate your techniques." Webb nodded politely, his expression neutral. "We appreciate the opportunity, General. What would you like to begin?" "Tomorrow morning," Korvax replied. "We'll start with a simple exercise. Your forces against mine in a capture-the-flag scenario. The jungle section, designated Area 12, will serve as the battlefield. Standard rules of engagement. Non-lethal weapons only, of course." "Of course," Webb agreed. "We look forward to it." As the humans were escorted to their temporary quarters, the Imperial officers gathered in the command center. The holographic displays showed the humans unpacking their gear, checking their weapons, and studying maps of the training area. "Look at them," Lieutenant Krex laughed. "They're actually planning to use those antique rifles. Don't they realize our armor can withstand direct hits from vehicle-mounted weapons?" "This will be over in minutes," Commander Seraph predicted. "My soldiers will locate them with thermal imaging and neutralize them before they can fire a single shot." But Colonel Webb and his team weren't concerned with Imperial boasting. As night fell over Verdant 7, they gathered in their quarters for a final briefing. The room was sparse, containing only basic furniture and a holographic projector showing the jungle terrain. "Remember your training," Webb addressed his team. "The Empire expects us to play by their rules, to meet them with matching force. They don't understand that the jungle has its own rules." Sergeant Sarah Chun, the team's lead sniper, studied the terrain map intently. "The vegetation is denser than Earth's Amazon. Visibility will be limited to maybe 20 meters in most areas." "Perfect," Webb replied. "They'll rely on their technology. Thermal sensors, motion detectors, electromagnetic scanners. They've forgotten that technology can be fooled, but the jungle never lies." Corporal James Murphy, their jungle warfare specialist, added his observations. "The local flora contains high amounts of metallic compounds. It'll play havoc with their sensors. And the wildlife is incredibly active, constant motion and heat signatures everywhere." "What about their power armor?" asked Private Lisa Zhang, one of the younger team members. Webb smiled grimly. 300 kilograms of metal and ceramics. Impressive on open ground, but in soft jungle soil, through dense undergrowth, they'll move like wounded elephants. The team spent the rest of the night preparing. They treated their uniforms with local plant extracts to mask their scent. They adjusted their weapons for the humid environment. Most importantly, they synchronized their understanding of the terrain and developed contingency plans for every scenario. Meanwhile, in the Imperial Command Center, General Korvax and his officers finalized their own strategy. Their plan was straightforward. Overwhelming technological superiority would carry the day. "Deploy 3 squads in standard sweep formation," Korvax ordered. "Full sensor suite active. The moment you detect human positions, converge and neutralize. This should take no more than 30 minutes." The Imperial soldiers prepared their equipment with practiced efficiency. Power armor systems were charged to full capacity. Weapon systems were calibrated for non-lethal stunning effects. Tactical displays were synchronized across all units. As dawn broke over Verdant 7, both forces moved to their starting positions. The jungle awakened with the sounds of alien wildlife, screeches, howls, and rustling that created a constant backdrop of noise. The Imperial forces entered the jungle with confidence. Their powered armor suits crashed through the undergrowth, servo motors whining as they compensated for the uneven terrain. Heads-up displays showed multiple heat signatures, wildlife scattering at their approach. "Sensor contact," reported squad leader Torvik. Multiple humanoid signatures, bearing 270. Converge on position. Korvax ordered from the command center. Remember, this is a demonstration. Try not to embarrass them too badly. The three Imperial squads adjusted their approach, forming a pincer movement around the detected positions. Their heavy footfalls left deep impressions in the soft jungle floor as they advanced. But something was wrong. As they closed on the coordinates, the sensor readings became confused. What appeared to be human heat signatures suddenly scattered in impossible directions. Some seemed to vanish entirely, while others multiplied. "Command, we're experiencing sensor malfunctions," Torvik reported, unable to maintain target lock. In the command center, technicians scrambled to adjust their equipment. The tactical display showed chaos, dozens of false readings, ghost signals, and impossible movements. "Must be the metallic flora," one technician suggested. "It's creating interference patterns." "Switch to visual tracking," Korvax ordered. "They can't hide from direct observation." But as the Imperial forces pushed deeper into the jungle, they found that visual tracking was nearly useless. The dense canopy filtered sunlight into a green twilight. Vines and branches created a maze of obstacles. Every shadow could hide an enemy. Every rustle could signal an attack. Unknown to the Imperial forces, the human team had split into two-person sniper teams, each moving independently through the jungle. They had spent the pre-dawn hours setting up false heat signatures using chemical heating packs wrapped in emergency blankets. They had studied the movement patterns of local wildlife and positioned themselves along natural travel corridors. Sarah Chun and her spotter, Corporal David Kim, lay motionless beneath a fallen log. Their bodies were covered in mud and local vegetation, rendering them nearly invisible even to the naked eye. Through her rifle scope, Chun watched an Imperial soldier crash through the underbrush 50 meters away. The powered armor was impressive, but its very strength was a weakness here. Every movement was telegraphed by the whine of servos and the crash of breaking vegetation. The soldier's head moved mechanically, scanning designated sectors according to his tactical computer's recommendations. He never noticed the slight depression in the forest floor where two humans lay perfectly still. Chin's rifle was a masterpiece of human engineering, not in terms of raw power, but in precision and adaptability. The suppressor reduced its already quiet report to barely a whisper. The ammunition was specially designed for this exercise, non-lethal rounds that would deliver a powerful electromagnetic pulse on impact, designed to temporarily disable Imperial armor systems. She waited, controlling her breathing, feeling the jungle's rhythm. The Imperial soldier paused, his helmet turning as he scanned for threats. In that moment of stillness, Chun squeezed the trigger. The round struck exactly where the neck seal joined the helmet to the chest plate, a vulnerability her team had identified through careful study of Imperial armor specifications. The electromagnetic pulse surged through the suit systems, causing a momentary shutdown of motor controls. The soldier toppled backward, his armor's weight working against him. Before his squad mates could react, two more shots rang out from different directions. Two more soldiers fell, their suits similarly disabled. "Contact! Contact!" Squad leader Torvik shouted. Enemy fire from unable to determine direction. The remaining Imperial soldiers formed a defensive circle, their weapons sweeping the jungle for targets. But the humans had already melted back into the undergrowth, moving to new positions with practiced stealth. In the command center, chaos erupted. The tactical display showed 3 soldiers down, but no enemy positions could be determined. The audio pickups recorded only the standard jungle noise. No voices, no movement, no mechanical sounds. "Impossible," General Korvax muttered. "How can they move without making noise? Where are their heat signatures?" What the Imperials didn't understand was that the humans weren't trying to hide their heat signatures completely. That would have been suspicious. Instead, they had learned to blend them with the environment. By positioning themselves near warm rocks, in patches of sunlight, or beside decomposing logs that generated natural heat, they became part of the jungle's thermal landscape. The exercise continued for 6 hours. Imperial squads pushed deeper into the jungle, only to find themselves repeatedly ambushed by an enemy they couldn't see or track. Soldiers fell one by one to precisely place shots. Attempts to use area effect weapons only revealed their own positions, drawing more sniper fire. By noon, 27 of the 30 Imperial soldiers had been eliminated. The remaining 3, including squad leader Torvik, had abandoned their sweep pattern and taken defensive positions. They were effectively pinned down, unable to advance without exposing themselves to sniper fire. In contrast, the human forces had suffered only 2 casualties, both from wildlife encounters rather than enemy action. The jungle that the Imperials had dismissed as primitive had become their greatest ally. Colonel Webb observed the battlefield from his concealed command post. His teams had performed exactly as trained, using patience, positioning, and precision to overcome a technologically superior force. But this was only a demonstration. The real test would come when the Empire realized that human hunters were not to be mocked. As the exercise concluded with a human victory, General Korvax stood in his command center, staring at the tactical display in disbelief. The best soldiers in the Empire, equipped with the finest technology available, had been systematically dismantled by humans with primitive weapons. How was all he could manage? The answer would come soon enough, and with it a new understanding of what it meant to face human hunters in their chosen environment. The Empire had laughed at the concept of snipers and jungle warfare. They wouldn't be laughing much longer. News of the training exercise on Verdant 7 spread through the Galactic Empire like wildfire. The official military channels tried to suppress the information, but soldiers talk, and soon every military installation buzzed with rumors of the impossible human victory. In the Imperial High Command chambers on the capital world of Krelios Prime, emergency sessions were called. The footage from Verdant 7 played on repeat, showing Imperial soldiers falling one by one to an enemy that remained invisible throughout the entire engagement. Admiral Zarthak stood before the assembled military leadership, his 4 arms clasped behind his back. The jovial mockery from weeks before had been replaced by cold fury. This was clearly a fluke, he declared. The humans exploited specific weaknesses in our training exercise parameters. In real combat, with full weapons authorized and orbital support available, the outcome would be very different. General Thox's tentacles writhed in agitation. My sources indicate the humans used some form of advanced camouflage technology they haven't disclosed. No primitive species could achieve such results with mere training and conventional weapons. I disagree, Commander Seraph interjected, her crystalline form pulsing with different colors indicating deep thought. I've analyzed every frame of the footage. There's no evidence of technology beyond their projectile weapons. They simply understood the environment better than we did. Impossible. Zarthak slammed one of his fists on the table. The Empire has conquered 1,000 worlds. We have defeated species with abilities beyond human comprehension. We will not be humiliated by primitive hunters playing in the mud. The Council reached a decision. The demonstration on Verdant 7 would be dismissed as an anomaly, but privately, new doctrines would be developed. More importantly, when the inevitable conflict with humanity erupted, the Empire would show no mercy. That conflict came sooner than expected. 3 months after the Verdant 7 exercise, a dispute over mining rights in the Kepler sector escalated into open warfare. The Empire deployed its 3rd fleet to secure the system, expecting the humans to back down when faced with overwhelming force. Instead, humanity dispatched a curious response. Rather than meeting the Imperial fleet with their own navy, they sent infiltration teams to the 3 jungle worlds the Empire was using as forward bases. The Imperial commanders scoffed at this strategy. How could ground forces affect a space-based conflict? On the jungle world of Gorath Prime, Base Commander Vorik received reports of the incoming human forces with amusement. Let them come, he told his staff. We've learned from Verdant 7. This time, we're ready. The Imperial forces had indeed adapted. They had developed new sensor algorithms to filter out environmental interference. They had trained special units in patience and stillness. They had even recruited native guides familiar with jungle terrain. Most importantly, this was not a training exercise. Lethal force was authorized. The human forces arrived, as before, small teams with minimal equipment. But this time, they faced an enemy that had prepared specifically to counter their tactics. Master Sergeant Robert Anderson led one of the human strike teams. A veteran of 30 years, he had earned his reputation in the dense forests of Earth and the alien jungles of a dozen worlds. His team of 8 specialists infiltrated Goreth Prime's northern continent, their target being the Imperial supply depot that fed their military operations. Remember, Anderson briefed his team as they moved through the undergrowth. This isn't Verdant 7. They'll be ready for us. That means we adapt. The first sign of the Empire's new tactics came when Specialist Maria Rodriguez nearly triggered a sensor mine. The device was cunningly hidden, designed to detect the specific electromagnetic signature of human equipment. Only her instincts, honed by years of training, prevented her from stepping into its detection field. "They're learning," she whispered into her comm unit. "Good," Anderson replied. "Means they're thinking like soldiers instead of conquerors." Torres Chun, scout ahead. Let's see what else they've prepared. The human teams discovered an intricate network of defenses around the Imperial base. Motion sensors covered obvious approach routes. Aerial drones patrolled in random patterns. Guard posts were positioned with overlapping fields of fire. The Empire had clearly studied human infiltration tactics and developed counters. But humans have been perfecting the art of war for millennia, and adaptation was in their blood. Instead of approaching the base directly, Anderson's team spent 3 days observing from extreme distance. They noted patrol patterns, identified sensor blind spots, and, most importantly, studied the local wildlife. Goreth Prime's jungle teemed with aggressive fauna, including pack hunters that regularly tested the base's defenses. On the 4th night, Anderson initiated his plan. Using ultrasonic emitters, his team agitated a pack of Garathian raptors, 6-legged predators with natural camouflage abilities. The creatures, driven into a frenzy, charged the base's eastern perimeter. Alarms blared as dozens of raptors triggered sensor grids and attacked automated defense turrets. Imperial soldiers rushed to repel the wildlife assault, their attention focused on the very real threat of being torn apart by alien predators. In the chaos, 3 human sniper teams moved into position. They had covered themselves in raptor scent glands, making them smell like part of the attack to any biological sensors. Their targets weren't the soldiers fighting off the raptors. Those were too alert, too ready. Instead, they aimed for the base's critical infrastructure. Sarah Chun, who had proven herself on Verdant 7, lined up her shot on the primary sensor array's power coupling. The component was supposed to be protected by energy shields, but the Raptor's assault had triggered so many defensive systems that power was being redirected to anti-personnel weapons. Her rifle spoke with a whisper, the hypervelocity round punching through the minimal shielding and destroying the delicate electronics within. Across the base, similar shots disabled communications arrays, vehicle charging stations, and water purification systems. The Imperial forces didn't realize they were under human attack until the Raptor assault ended, and they discovered the damage. By then, the human teams had vanished back into the jungle, leaving only confusion in their wake. This pattern repeated across 3 worlds. Human infiltrators didn't engage in direct combat with Imperial forces. Instead, they turned the jungle itself into a weapon. They sabotaged equipment, disrupted supply lines, and created paranoia among Imperial troops who never knew when or where the next attack would come. On Thessos 4, a human team led by Captain Jennifer Walsh demonstrated another evolution in tactics. The Imperial base there had implemented even more stringent defenses, including AI-controlled weapon systems that could engage targets faster than any organic being could react. Walsh's solution was elegant in its simplicity. Her team spent 2 weeks mapping the territories of various jungle species, particularly the metallic vine colonies that grew throughout the forest. These vines were attracted to electrical fields and would grow toward any power source. Using small electrical lures, the humans gradually guided vine growth toward the Imperial base. The process was slow and natural, triggering no alarms. The vines were a known hazard, but a manageable one that the base's automated systems routinely trimmed back. On the appointed night, Walsh's team introduced a biological agent they had developed, a harmless compound that dramatically accelerated vine growth. Within hours, metallic vines overwhelmed the base's defenses, growing into every exposed system and creating massive short circuits. The AI-controlled weapons turned on each other as their targeting systems were corrupted by electromagnetic interference. In the chaos, human snipers eliminated key targets, officers, technicians, and communication specialists. They moved like ghosts through the vine-choked base, striking and vanishing before organized resistance could form. The psychological impact on Imperial forces was devastating. Soldiers who had laughed at human primitive tactics now jumped at every sound in the jungle. They saw snipers in every shadow, saboteurs in every system malfunction. The jungle, which they had dismissed as merely difficult terrain, became a source of constant dread. General Korvax, who had witnessed the first human demonstration on Verdun 7, found himself assigned to develop new countertactics. He studied every after-action report, analyzed every piece of footage, and slowly began to understand the human approach to warfare. They don't fight the enemy, he explained to a gathering of officers. They fight the environment, and let the environment fight us. Every jungle is different, with different wildlife, different vegetation, different challenges. They take the time to understand each one, to become part of it. We try to impose our will on the jungle. They accept what it is and use it. His insights led to new Imperial tactics. Bases were relocated to open areas, creating kill zones around them by clearing vegetation. Environmental suits were upgraded to completely seal soldiers from biological and chemical agents. Patrol patterns became truly random, determined by quantum generators to prevent prediction. But for every adaptation, the humans developed a counter. When the Empire created clear zones around their bases, human teams used long-range precision fire from beyond visual range, their bullets arriving seconds before the sound. When environmental suits prevented biological attacks, humans targeted the suit's air filtration systems with corrosive compounds that took days to manifest. The conflict escalated when the Empire decided to make an example of the human colony world of New Burma, a jungle planet similar to Southeast Asia on Earth. The Imperial fleet arrived in overwhelming force, prepared to demonstrate that space superiority trumped any ground-based tactics. Colonel Marcus Webb, the officer who had led the first demonstration on Verdun 7, was placed in charge of New Burma's defense. He had only 300 special operations soldiers and whatever colonial volunteers he could train. Against him, the Empire deployed 20,000 troops and a fleet capable of destroying the planet itself. Webb's strategy was unconventional even by human standards. He didn't try to defend population centers or strategic locations. Instead, he dispersed his forces throughout the planet's vast jungles and waited. The Imperial invasion began with orbital bombardment of suspected military installations. Massive energy beams turned jungle into glass, creating landing zones for the Empire's ground forces. Drop ships descended like metal rain, disgorging thousands of power-armored soldiers. General Zarthak personally led the invasion, determined to crush human resistance and restore the Empire's reputation. His forces swept across New Burma's primary continent, occupying cities and establishing control points. They met minimal resistance. A few snipers who fired token shots before retreating, some bobby traps that caused minor casualties. Where are they? Zarthak demanded after a week of almost unopposed advance. Where is this vaunted human resistance? The answer came that night. Across the planet, small teams of human soldiers emerged from hidden positions. They had spent weeks preparing, studying Imperial procedures, identifying weaknesses. Now, they struck simultaneously at dozens of targets. Supply convoys traveling through jungle roads came under precision fire. Sniper rounds found the joints in power armor, the vision slots in vehicles, the exposed fuel cells of hover transports. Communications relays exploded, cutting off units from command structure. Water purification systems failed as biological contaminants were introduced upstream. But the most devastating attacks were psychological. Imperial soldiers would wake to find their sentries eliminated silently, their bodies positioned to maximum horrific effect. Messages were left in Imperial script. The jungle sees you. You are not safe. We are watching. Some units reported hearing voices in the night, whispers in their own languages coming from the darkness. Others swore they saw faces in the vegetation, human snipers who vanished when targeted. The jungle itself seemed to turn against them, with wildlife attacks increasing and previously safe plants suddenly, causing severe allergic reactions. The Empire's technological superiority meant nothing when soldiers were too afraid to leave their bases. Advanced sensors couldn't restore morale to troops who knew death could come from any direction at any moment. Power armor didn't prevent the need for food, water, and sleep, all of which became opportunities for human strikes. Zarthak found himself in the same command center that colonial administrators had used, reading reports of mounting casualties and deteriorating morale. His initial force of 20,000 had suffered only 2,000 killed, but another 5,000 were combat ineffective due to psychological trauma, disease, or equipment failures. Wow, he asked his staff. How do 300 humans hold off the might of the Empire? Lieutenant Krex, who had mocked human tactics months before, had spent time studying their methods. They're not holding us off, sir. They're bleeding us. Every day we stay here costs us more than we can afford. Not in soldiers. We can always get more soldiers. But in credibility, in morale, in the will to fight. The breaking point came when Webb's forces executed their masterstroke. They had identified the one weakness in the Empire's strategy, its reliance on orbital support. Using captured Imperial equipment and codes extracted from prisoners, they transmitted false intelligence about a massive human force gathering in the southern jungle. Zarthak, eager for a decisive battle, committed his reserves to a massive assault on the coordinates provided. Orbital bombardment cleared vast swaths of jungle, and 10,000 soldiers advanced on what they believed would be the human stronghold. They found nothing but empty jungle and a single message carved into a massive tree. Thank you for the distraction. While the Empire's forces were concentrated in the south, human teams struck at the real targets, the orbital defense platforms protecting the Imperial fleet. Using a combination of cyber warfare and precisely placed explosives, they disabled the platform's IFF systems. When a scheduled supply convoy arrived from Imperial space, the confused defense platforms opened fire, destroying 3 cargo vessels before the error was discovered. The loss of supplies meant the ground forces would have to rely on local foraging. In a jungle where humans had spent months poisoning water sources and introducing toxins into the food chain, the Imperial fleet, now vulnerable without their defense platforms, pulled back to high orbit. Without close orbital support, ground forces lost their primary advantage. Artillery strikes took minutes instead of seconds to arrive. Medical evacuations became risky. Resupply drops could be intercepted. Admiral Zarthak faced a choice that would have seemed impossible months before. He could continue the occupation, accepting mounting casualties and the complete breakdown of his forces' morale. Or he could withdraw, admitting that the mighty Galactic Empire had been defeated by 300 human jungle fighters. The war continued for 3 more months, but the outcome was never truly in doubt after New Burma. Across the contested sectors, the pattern repeated. Imperial forces would arrive with overwhelming firepower, seize obvious objectives, then find themselves trapped in a nightmare of ambushes, sabotage, and psychological warfare. The Empire's soldiers, trained for decisive battles and technological superiority, couldn't adapt to an enemy that refused to fight on their terms. Humans didn't mass their forces for glorious charges. They didn't build fortifications to be destroyed. They simply became one with the jungle and made life unbearable for anyone who tried to control it. In the end, it wasn't military defeat that forced the Empire to negotiate. It was the slow realization that victory against humans would require destroying every jungle, forest, and wilderness in contested space. Even then, the humans would likely just adapt to whatever environment remained. The peace talks began 6 months after the failed invasion of New Burma. The Empire, which had never negotiated as equals with a younger species, found itself sitting across from human diplomats who smiled politely and spoke of mutual cooperation. But everyone in the room knew the truth. The Galactic Empire, with all its advanced technology and military might, had been brought to the negotiating table by soldiers who fought with patience, precision, and an understanding that in war, the environment was not an obstacle to be overcome, but an ally to be embraced. The age of human expansion into the galaxy had begun, and it started not with great fleets or superweapons, but with snipers in the jungle who changed everything. 5 years after the peace accord was signed, the galaxy looked very different. The Galactic Empire still existed, but its iron grip on known space had loosened considerably. Where once Imperial fleets had enforced order through overwhelming firepower, now diplomatic vessels negotiated trade agreements and mutual defense pacts. The change had been gradual but undeniable. After the Jungle Wars, as historians were already calling them, dozens of species that had chafed under imperial rule began asserting their independence. They had seen the impossible, a young species with inferior technology defeating the Empire's best forces. If humans could do it, why not them? Admiral Zardhak, now retired from active service, stood in his private study overlooking the crystalline forests of his homeworld. The wall behind him displayed commendations from 1,000 battles, but his 4 eyes were fixed on a simple photograph. A human sniper hidden so perfectly in jungle foliage that even knowing where to look, he could barely make out the outline. His door chimed, and his aide announced a visitor. To Zardhak's surprise, Colonel Marcus Webb entered, wearing civilian clothes, but carrying himself with the unmistakable bearing of a career soldier. "Admiral," Webb nodded respectfully. "Thank you for agreeing to see me." "Colonel," Zardhak replied, gesturing to a chair designed to accommodate human physiology. "I must admit, I'm curious why you requested this meeting." Webb settled into the chair, his movements still careful and measured despite the peaceful setting. "I'm writing a book about the war. Not a military manual or propaganda piece, but an honest account of how we changed each other. I wanted to hear your perspective." Zardhak's mandibles clicked in what Webb had learned was amusement. "Changed each other? Colonel, your species brought the mightiest military force in galactic history to its knees. I'd say the changing was rather one-sided." "Was it?" Webb asked. "The Empire I see today barely resembles the one we first encountered. Your military has completely restructured its training programs. Your diplomatic corps actually negotiates now instead of simply demanding. And from what I hear, Imperial forces have become quite adept at unconventional warfare themselves." It was true. The lessons learned in the jungles had spread throughout Imperial military doctrine. The rigid adherence to technological superiority had given way to a more flexible approach. Imperial Special Forces now trained in environment-specific tactics. They learned patience, stealth, and, most importantly, respect for the terrain they fought in. "We had no choice," Zardhak admitted. "After your people showed what was possible, every rebellious faction in the galaxy started studying your methods. The Vorthan insurgents on Helios 9 used your tactics against our garrison there. We had to adapt or face defeats across our territory." "And humanity?" Webb prompted. "How have we changed?" Zardhak studied the human before him. "You become more dangerous, not less. Before the war, you were united against us. Now, some of your corporations work with Imperial interests while others supply weapons to our enemies. You've learned to play the game of galactic politics perhaps too well." Webb nodded thoughtfully. "My daughter just enlisted in the Colonial Marines. They still teach jungle warfare, you know, but Now they also train in zero-gravity combat, asteroid mining facility infiltration, and a dozen other specialties. We learn from you too, the value of technology when properly applied, the importance of understanding multiple species psychology, the complexities of governing diverse populations. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Two old soldiers who had faced each other across rifle scopes, now sharing memories across a tea table. "There's something I've always wanted to know," Zarthak said finally. "That first exercise on Verdant 7. Did you know it would lead to war?" Webb shook his head. "We hoped it would prevent war. We wanted to show that attacking humanity would be costly, that we could be valuable allies instead of conquered subjects. I don't think any of us imagined how far it would go." "The Jungle Wars," Zarthak mused. Such a simple name for something that reshaped galactic civilization. "Do you know what truly defeated us, Colonel?" Webb waited, recognizing the rhetorical nature of the question. "It wasn't your snipers, though they were magnificent. It wasn't your tactics, though they were innovative. It was the idea you represented, that advanced technology and overwhelming force weren't the ultimate arbiters of power. Once that idea took hold, our entire system began to crumble." On the other side of the galaxy, Sarah Chun stood before a class of mixed species at the new Galactic Military Academy on Haven Station. Her students included humans, Krellians, Vorthins, and a dozen other species, all learning the art of precision marksmanship. "The first rule of sniping," she explained, manipulating a holographic display to show various environments, "is patience. Your target will reveal itself if you wait long enough. The second rule is respect for your weapon, your environment, and your enemy. Underestimate any of these, and you'll fail." A young Krellian raised one of her forearms. "Instructor Chun, the manual says human snipers can remain motionless for days. Is this exaggeration?" Chun smiled. 3 days, 17 hours is my personal record, set during the siege of New Burma. The Imperial Patrol passed within 2 meters of my position twice before I took the shot that eliminated their communications officer. The mixed reactions from her students amused her, awe from some, disbelief from others. She activated another display, showing the evolution of sniper tactics across different species. "What humans brought to warfare wasn't just marksmanship," she continued. "Every species has sharpshooters. What we brought was a philosophy, the fusion of hunter and environment, patience and precision, individual skill and strategic impact. Now, each of your species has adapted these concepts to your own strengths." She highlighted several examples. The Etherians had developed phase shift sniping, using their natural ability to partially exist in parallel dimensions. The Saurians combined their camouflage abilities with human stalking techniques. Even the Krellians, with their 4 arms, had created stable shooting platforms that allowed for incredible long-range accuracy. "The galaxy learned from humanity," Chun concluded, "but humanity also learned from the galaxy. The future of warfare isn't about one species' dominance, but about combining our diverse strengths." After class, Chun received a priority message. The colonial world of Titan's Garden was experiencing raids from pirates using Imperial-era equipment. The local government, a coalition of human and alien settlers, had requested specialist assistance. Within hours, Chun was aboard a fast transport with a mixed-species team. Her spotter was a Vorthin whose compound eyes could detect minute movements at incredible distances. Their technical specialist was a Krellian who had served in the Imperial forces during the Jungle Wars. The team medic was human, but trained in treating a dozen different physiologies. Titan's Garden was a frontier world, its vast forests reminiscent of the jungles where humanity had made its reputation. But these pirates weren't Imperial soldiers bound by doctrine and hierarchy. They were cunning, desperate, and had learned the same lessons about asymmetric warfare. The first engagement came sooner than expected. Chin's team was still establishing their base camp when sensors detected incoming threats. Not the heavy footfalls of power armor, but the careful movement of skilled hunters. "They're using our own tactics against us," her Vorthin spotter observed, his eye stalks swiveling independently to track multiple approaches. Chin smiled grimly. then we'll have to be better at it than they are. The firefight that followed would have been impossible before the Jungle Wars. Human snipers provided precision fire, while Vorthan scouts used their natural agility to outflank enemy positions. The Krellian tech specialists deployed sensor drones that adapted to local interference patterns, something developed from painful experience fighting humans. But the pirates had tricks of their own. Some were human veterans who had fought in the Jungle Wars. Others were Imperial deserters who had studied human tactics extensively. The forest became a three-dimensional chess game where every move could be lethal. Chun found herself stalking a particularly skilled enemy sniper. The shooter's technique was excellent, patient, methodical, using the environment to maximum advantage. But there is something familiar about the pattern of movement, the choice of positions. Through her scope, she finally got a clear view of her opponent. It was human, wearing mixed military surplus gear from a dozen sources. As she lined up her shot, the enemy sniper suddenly looked directly at her position and raised one hand in a gesture of recognition. Chun hesitated. In that moment of mutual acknowledgement between two masters of their craft, she saw what the galaxy had become. The skills that humanity had used to win their freedom were now dispersed among dozens of species, used by lawkeepers and lawbreakers alike. She took the shot, a non-lethal round that would disable without killing. The enemy sniper fell, and the pirate attack faltered without their overwatch. As medical teams secured the prisoners, Chun approached the downed sniper. "Nice shooting," the woman said, grimacing as medics tended to her. "You must be Sarah Chun. I studied your work on Verdant 7 when I was in training." "And you are?" "Lieutenant Morrison, formerly of the Colonial Marines. Turned freelance after the war ended, and they didn't need so many snipers anymore." Chun felt a familiar weight, the burden of unintended consequences. They had changed the galaxy, but not all changes were for the better. The skills developed for liberation could just as easily be used for oppression. Back on Haven Station, the Galactic Council convened for its monthly session. The council chamber was a marvel of compromise architecture, designed to accommodate the environmental needs of 50 different species. Where once the Empire had ruled by decree, now representatives debated and negotiated. The human ambassador, David Kim, formerly Corporal Kim, Chin's spotter on Verdant 7, addressed the assembly. "The pirate situation on the frontier worlds is escalating. We need a coordinated response that combines all our strengths." The Krellian representative clicked his mandibles in agreement. "The humans are correct. These criminals use the very tactics that reshaped our military doctrine. Only by working together can we counter them." It was a scene that would have been unthinkable a decade earlier. Former enemies now allied against common threats. The vote was unanimous, establishing joint task forces that would combine human unconventional warfare expertise with alien technological advantages. In the years that followed, these mixed units became the backbone of galactic peacekeeping. They fought pirates in asteroid belts, insurgents in gas giant mining stations, and slavers in the lawless regions between stellar nations. Each engagement taught new lessons, spread new tactics, and further blurred the lines between human and alien military doctrine. The Galactic Military Academy expanded, becoming the premier institution for military education. Veterans of the Jungle Wars from both sides served as instructors, teaching the next generation to fight smarter, not just harder. Colonel Webb's book, From Jungle to Stars, The Evolution of Galactic Warfare, became required reading at military academies across known space. In it, he argued that humanity's greatest contribution wasn't their sniper tactics or jungle warfare expertise, but the idea that military might must be tempered with understanding, patience, and respect for one's environment. 20 years after first contact, Admiral Zarthak's prophecy had come true in ways he never expected. The galaxy had indeed been changed by those snipers in the jungle. But rather than humanity conquering through force, they had triggered an evolution in how all species approach conflict. The old model of technological superiority and overwhelming force hadn't disappeared, but it was now balanced with cunning, adaptation, and environmental awareness. Wars still occurred, but they were fought with a precision that minimized collateral damage. Soldiers still died, but they died as thinking warriors, not mere projections of mechanical force. In a quiet ceremony on Earth, Sarah Chun retired from active service. She had trained thousands of snipers from dozens of species, written the definitive manual on interspecies small unit tactics, and helped establish the doctrine that would guide military forces for generations. At her retirement ceremony, representatives from across the galaxy attended. Former enemies saluted her, acknowledging the warrior who had shown them a different way to fight. Young soldiers looked at her with awe, seeing a living legend who had changed history from the scope of a rifle. In her farewell speech, Chin reflected on the journey from Verdant 7 to the present. "We didn't set out to revolutionize galactic warfare," she said. "We simply wanted to survive, to prove that humanity deserved a place among the stars. That we succeeded by teaching the galaxy to see the jungle not as an obstacle, but as an ally is perhaps fitting." She paused, looking out at the assembled crowd. Human and alien, soldier and civilian, former enemies now united in common purpose. The Empire laughed at human hunters, at our snipers in the jungle. They thought our patience was weakness, our precision was primitive. They learned otherwise, but so did we. We learned that strength comes in many forms, that every species has something to teach, and that the greatest victory is not in defeating your enemy, but in transforming them into your ally. The ceremony ended with a tradition that had spread throughout known space, a moment of absolute stillness, honoring the patience of the hunter, the precision of the sniper, and the profound changes that could come from something as simple as a soldier waiting in the jungle for the perfect shot. As the attendees dispersed, returning to their worlds and their duties, they carried with them the lessons of the jungle wars. Not just the tactical knowledge of camouflage and marksmanship, but the deeper understanding that true strength lay not in imposing one's will on the environment, but in becoming one with it. The galaxy had been transformed by those first human snipers on Verdant 7. Where once there had been conquerors and conquered, now there were partners in a complex dance of cooperation and competition. The jungle had taught them all, and in learning its lessons, they had created a new galactic order. The empire that had laughed at human hunters now trained its own forces in their methods. The humans who had hidden in jungles now walked openly in the halls of power. And somewhere in the vast reaches of space, on countless worlds with countless environments, soldiers of all species practiced the patient art of the sniper, waiting for the perfect moment to change history with a single, well-placed shot. The jungle wars were over, but their legacy lived on in every shadow, every careful movement, and every moment of perfect stillness before the trigger was pulled. The galaxy would never be the same, and that change had begun with something as simple as humans refusing to fight on anyone's terms but their own. In the end, the greatest lesson wasn't about warfare at all. It was about adaptation, respect, and the power of the individual to change the course of civilizations. The snipers in the jungle had done more than win a war. They had shown the galaxy a new way forward, one patient shot at a time.